You're listening to Across the Pondcast. Cybersecurity rants and war stories from both sides of the Atlantic.
Hello and welcome to Across the Pondcast, a show where we talk and occasionally rant about cybersecurity topics with perspectives from both sides of the Atlantic. I'm Tib3rius. I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host in need of a haircut, Mr. Andy Swift, and today we're joined by Jonathan Leitschuh, self-described OSS vulnerability janitor, software engineer, and software security researcher, who's here to share a few of his war stories with us. Jonathan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Andy, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Not too bad. Back from race weekend last weekend.
Nice. Did you win?
No. I got my ass handed to me once again by 60 and 70-year-olds bombing round about 6 seconds quicker than I can go. But I enjoyed being there, and that's what matters, right?
What kind of racing is this? Sorry.
Cars. So I race silly little cars called Caterham 7s round tracks. It's great fun, but I have a lot to learn. Let's put it that way. I thought I was an epic driver.
To be fair, they are very fun to drive. Like I've helped Swift to drive them.
Helped. They're good. You've held on very tight.
Well, I have. I've sat and I've been the navigator.
Yeah, man. We've done trips across Wales. We've road tripped.
Yeah. Well, my feet don't really work with the pedals because I've got quite big feet.
It's like the dirt road riding where you're sitting in the passenger seat and you're like, up 7, down 3, up up 5, like that sort of, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I just pretend I'm helping. But like you have to wear special shoes for your pedals, right?
I do.
I do. My feet would just not work.
It's quite a high chance of pressing too many at the same time, which is not a great idea, if I'm honest. The three pedals don't tend to work harmoniously together unless they're in a certain order. All at once is bad. But no, other than that, mate, I am good. I've had a very nice week so far. But let's crack on and let's you tell us about sponsors. This is your favourite bit.
Yes.
Make the pause nice and long.
Goodness. That's going to be weird because it's a reference to 3 episodes ago now.
Yes.
Before we start, this show is made possible thanks to our sponsors. If you want to sponsor an episode, please send an email to sponsors@acrossthepodcast.net for more details. Is that pause good enough for you, Swift?
No, nowhere near long enough. I think we're going to have to do another retake.
No, the whole thing.
Probably from the top with Joseph.
From the top, yeah. God. The reference is not going to be understood. Right, Jonathan, not Joseph. Yes, in the previous take, I accidentally said Joseph for some reason. We first I think you first came on our radar unknowingly back in 2019. Me and Swift were both working as pen testers. I'm pretty sure Swift was still a pen tester. Maybe you were slightly above that.
I still am, but thank you.
Well, you're a director now. You're sort of high level. You're more office manager, I imagine. Oh. But anyway.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, you carry on. I'll just get back to my spreadsheets.
Yes. So, Jonathan, you found a Zoom vulnerability. A vulnerability in the famous and popular video conferencing suite Zoom in 2019. Can you tell us all about that and how you discovered it and, just the wild ride it took you on?
Yeah. So 2019, I found a security vulnerability in Zoom's web server. I was working for Hewlett Packard Enterprise at the time. I'd been working for Plexi and we were getting bought by Hewlett Packard Enterprise. It was during the acquisition and we were using Zoom at work. And I was really curious about how the click to join, you could click a link in Slack or you could click a link in your Google Calendar link and it would pop open a web browser and then the web browser would then spontaneously launch an application locally on your machine and there's no prompting in any of that chain. And I was like, okay, how is this done and how is it done securely? And the long answer to that is that it wasn't done securely. It was done in an insecure way and I found a vulnerability. And how I ended up doing this is I popped up on the Zoom webpage and just looked at the Chrome DevTools and was looking in the browser and I was seeing a network request to a localhost server that's running on my machine. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Where is it? What's this, what's this server? And so I ended up poking around on my machine and did an list LSOF dash something. Look up the port, found the process, the directory the process was running in, and it was being launched out of a hidden directory dot something under the user's home directory. There was this little daemon that was being installed on your machine. Funnily enough, if you uninstalled Zoom in the traditional way, that you drag Zoom, the application, to the trash, this little daemon was left behind in your machine. And it was actually being set up as a launch process. So the thing was launching on startup. So whenever your computer launched, it would start. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. It turns out this server was, the way that it was working was they were making had some JavaScript in your browser that was an image frame or an image tag to load a single pixel or some set of pixel image from this local web server, and that was being used to launch you into a Zoom call. And so you'd set the parameters in this GET request that the image request was being made, and that based upon that GET request, the Zoom server launched you into this call. And I was like, there's nothing stopping any website from generating that same image request and launching into a Zoom call. And so I've been doing a little bit of bug bounty research at the time, and I'd kind of gotten disillusioned by not getting paid for the vulnerabilities I was finding. And so I was like, okay, well, let's see, maybe I'll report it to Zoom. And I said, hey, Zoom, do you have a bug bounty program? And they said, oh, yeah, we do. It's just not public. I was like, okay, great. Because, my fallback would be if I had found this vulnerability, it seemed pretty impactful, I was going to report it to ZDI. And they're like, Zoom's like, oh, no, we have a bug bounty program. I'm like, okay, great. So I wrote up the full report to them and sent it to them. And they're like, okay, great. Can you submit it to our bug bounty program, which was given to me by a bug crowd at the time. And I looked at their bug bounty terms for their bug crowd report, and it had a non-disclosure agreement. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to agree to that. So I ended up continuing my conversation with them over email. Their payout would have been between $600 and $800 for that vulnerability. On top of that, they kind of just sat on it for, I gave them a 90-day disclosure window, which is the standard Google, 90-day window. And I think a week before the vulnerability was due to get disclosed, they came back with a fix, which was insufficient. I looked at the fix they proposed, and they kind of described what they were going to do. And I was like, I don't think this is sufficient. And they still shipped it with that. Anyways, I think they put like some sort of validation in the request to like verify that request could have only been generated by Zoom. And I don't think this is sufficient. And it took me a little bit of time after the 90-day window to the past to like finally dig in, because I think I was starting a new job at Gradle at the time and was onboarding in Switzerland. And so I get back from that trip, and it's like just the weekend before 4th of July. And I'm like, I'm curious. And, or it's the weekend after 4th of July. And I poke around to the thing, and I'm like, actually, yeah, this is not great. I was able to bypass the whole thing just by embedding all of Zoom's, like the Zoom launch page, just throwing it into an iframe. And basically, so they're like, yeah, we put this guard in place, but I'm just like, yeah, I can just throw your whole website into an iframe, and that still works. I can still get the same impact, even though I'm using a different attack chain. And they're like, well, that's a new vulnerability. And I'm like, no, it's not. I told you that this was insufficient guard. I got the same impact. I'm still going public with it. And they're like, can you give us until Monday at like noon, because our West Coast team is going to come on board? I'm like, sure, fine, great. So July 19th, 2025. Nope, July 19th, 2019. A year before COVID, because people tell me, oh yeah, that Zoom vulnerability, that was the same time with COVID. No, it was the year before COVID. I hit the publish button on the POC, this Medium article, and included a proof of concept, which demonstrated, hey, like I can launch you into a Zoom call without your permission with your camera on. Also, if you've uninstalled Zoom, because they had this little bit of code in there, if you'd uninstalled Zoom because the daemon was installed in your machine and left behind, Zoom would helpfully reinstall itself for you. So I've heard this described as a Horcrux. If anybody's read Harry Potter, Zoom's Horcrux. It was its ability to stay alive for longer than it should have, and it was a helpful feature that could reinstall itself for you. And so I put in my POC in my write up a proof of concept link with a demo video, or a demo from a meeting room link that Zoom had actually handed me to test it with. And so I just started hanging out in that call. I posted it on Twitter, probably like one other place. And Zoom had actually published their blog post before I went public, because they got their comms out first, basically saying this is a feature, not a vulnerability, which was fine. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's a feature that they tried to fix and couldn't.
And they couldn't fix. Yeah. So there's a checkbox in the settings that says, yes, I do want my camera on when I join. So your audio was not automatically on. But when you were setting up the meeting, you could check a box that says turn participants' videos on when they're joining. So it's something that the host, when they were setting up the meeting, could control or not. And by default, the default shipped settings for Zoom allowed that behavior to work, and they were like, "Oh no, but you can change it so that your camera isn't on automatically." But like that's something you have to opt into. And so I'm like, okay, fine. Like I went public with this vulnerability on Twitter, and I just hung out in that Zoom call, and I start seeing people pop in to the call, like, and then shock. The first reporter that drops into that call is the reporter from BuzzFeed. Actually,
Nice.
Yeah. So BuzzFeed, and the funny thing, BuzzFeed's reporter is the first person talking, but the last one to like publish an article. I think it took them a day to get something out, and then this just starts building, and like the article just like asymptotic, sort of like, or not even like just like suddenly the chart on my Medium article starts going like this. It starts getting picked up by news agencies. I start getting pings from like, Lily Hay Newman at Wired. Some people just from like just different news agencies on Twitter start pinging me and being like, hey, like, we want to talk to you. And I'm in this Zoom call with people just regaling them with the story again and again and again. As people are joining, people are like, we had up with like, I think at our peak, we had 100 people, 150 people in that call. I think across the 3 days that call ran, there was like 1,500 people joined that call. So I ended up like making friends, like, I think I was up until 3 a.m. in the morning that night, just like, because the thing wasn't fixed. And so day 1 rolls, like the whole thing isn't fixed. Day 2 rolls around. I have like slept like, 4 hours. I wake up, the call is still going. There's still just as many people in it. It's still just as boisterous. I think around 11 o'clock or noon then that day, I'm sitting in this call with just talking to people about the incident. Like we're, trying to help people get it fixed. Some friend of mine named Karin Lines had written up Yara rules for to detect the thing. They were getting published on GitHub. Like, we were having like, we were helping people like give them advice on how to fix this appropriately. And around 11 o'clock, Eric Wan, the CEO of Zoom, joins the call. The CEO of a $14 billion company. They just IPO'd. During my disclosure window, they'd IPO'd. And so $14 billion company, the CEO joins this call. He's like, yeah, mea culpa, we screwed up. Like, we're going to fix it. On top of that, like, we were looking at like a bunch of other stuff with Zoom at this point. They're like, everybody's looking at Zoom. They're like, okay, so like the free tier for Zoom calls were unencrypted. I had somebody reach out to me and be like, hey, if I'm on the same network as Zoom, I can I can pull like the video feed just by like side channeling the video data and reconstitute a video call, what's going on in the video call, because it was the free tier was unencrypted at the time. I had people reaching out to about like other weird issues in Zoom. So yeah, so day 2, Zoom, Eric's Wan rolls around. They said, we screwed up. We are going to fix it. We are going to increase our bug bounty payouts, and we will commit to making the free tier have and not end-to-end, but having like encrypted comms for the Zoom call by default. And then
it's crazy that it was 2019.
Yeah,
and even the free tier was unencrypted. That's insane.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the enterprise tier is you pay for encryption, right? Oh, you want protection? You got to pay for it. It's an upsell.
I just feel like remember like it was like 2000 and I think was it 2009 or 2010 where like Facebook still worked on HTTP.
Well, that's
like
it was really
crazy.
It was really Snowden. I think that like was it was the Snowden's leaks were one of was the major catalyst for everybody switching to HTTPS across the entire industry. I think because they realized that like the interception was happening. Like the government had set up these data pipes that they were siphoning this data off between the data centers. And they're like, I think that was kind of the like, oh, like this stuff is not just hypothetical or theoretical, it's actually happening. I think that right, am I understanding that history a bit? That was like the catalyst for all that.
I think so. But even that was it 2012? I think with Snowden. It was 2012 or 2013 because I was still in London at the time. And I moved to the US in 2014. So I think it must have been 2012, 2013.
Maybe.
So even that is like 5-6 years before
2013.
Yeah, see, I can work it out based on when I was in London.
Yeah, because
I remember that dropped when I was in London. So yeah, but yeah, that's still like 5 or 6 years after that, and Zoom is still
Well,
It's annoying.
I found that so one of the vulnerabilities that I was digging into, like 2014, Max Wietzman did some research and found that basically Maven Central, which is the major artifact server for the Java ecosystem, was charging you a fee to resolve dependencies over HTTPS instead of HTTP. You could like donate to them and they'd give you access to. And he's like, hey, you want to take over he wrote a blog post saying, you want to take over the machine of any Java developer in the world, just man in the middle of their download connection to Maven Central, and you can pop shell on their machine. And I followed up in 2019. Actually, my research just before the Zoom vulnerability was looking at, hey, Max did this research, got Maven Central to turn on HTTPS for free for everybody in 2014. 2019, 5 years later, the industry is still using HTTP everywhere, like in Maven, resolving Maven Gradle build files. Like, so I did this massive bit of work to get the industry to shut off the use of HTTP in favor of HTTPS only across the Java ecosystem. And so you can, I managed to kill that vulnerability pretty solidly across the industry.
And it's like Ubuntu mirrors as well for like apt repos.
I think they do out of band validation.
They do now, I think.
Yes, yeah. I think my understanding is they do out of band like verification of the artifacts. But yes, similar sort of thing, right? Like you're downloading stuff over HTTP. Who the hell knows what's if it's been tampered with, if you don't have external validation. Maven did have external validation. You could do GPG key signing verification. No one turned that on at all.
That's the thing when you leave it as a turn it on option, isn't it? I mean, people need like a kick up the ass to go and do something, and it's usually when something bad happens. And you have all these security people, we all sit down there going, this is bad, it's going to be bad one day, and then no one does anything about it until something properly happens.
Well, it's for the Java ecosystem, I managed to convince all the artifact servers to shut off the use of HTTP, not just like redirect to HTTP for the HTTPS, like shut it off completely. And you can imagine that, so January 15th, 2019, that happened after my research came out in 2018. And you just, the Stack Overflow posts of people being like, my builds are broken all of a sudden. I'm getting these errors. What does this mean? And I'm like, stop using HTTP. You start using HTTPS. That's what's going wrong. So the Zoom thing. So Eric ended up on this call, and they ended up fixing the fix for it was that dialog box that pops up in Zoom that says, "Hey, would you actually like to join this call?" That was their fix. They also got rid of the local web server because, kind of, they almost them. So what happened was I'm sitting. So it's 2 days later on Wednesday. So the disclosure went out on Monday. I'm waking up on Wednesday, and I pull up Risky Business, and I'm listening to Patrick Gray, and my Zoom vulnerability is the headlining piece, and he's like, yeah, so this vulnerability, this Zoom vulnerability found by Jonathan Leitschuh, yada yada yada. But what he missed was this remote code execution vulnerability in Zoom's like web server running locally, and I'm like, I did what now? I mean, I knew that there was theoretically a remote code execution vulnerability, but I didn't know how it worked. Like, I think that I was like concerned that like you could take over one of Zoom's domains and that would work because they were having one of their domains expire soon. And if you could buy that domain, you could, you could control like the domain that the Zoom download came from. What I didn't realize was that was not my understanding of assembly it still is not great. And I was looking at disassembled, C# code or something like that. And so when I was looking in the binary, I saw that there was this check just looking at like, a bunch of domains to validate that the download was when you re-downloaded Zoom, it was coming from this trusted domain. And I'm like, okay, well, makes sense. But apparently that validation was not correctly validating against the host. It was just anywhere in the URL if that had that string .zoom.us. So you could create a malicious domain that had ended in that, payload, and you could get, remote code execution by, if you'd uninstalled Zoom and visited a malicious website, you could hit that malicious website could send a GET request to that server or to that locally running server, force a download of the Zoom client from a malicious server and get code execution. And Asset Note was the one that found that. And so I'm like, what the hell? And I didn't know this at the time. So I read, Jonathan missed a remote code execution vulnerability. I'm like, what? So I reach out to Patrick Gray, and I'm like, Patrick, what did I miss? And he's like, yeah, go talk to the Asset Note guys. And they explained that to me. And I'm like, okay, great. And so I'm like, this is not great. And so I reach out to Apple, and because Apple had rolled out malware removal tool, MRT rules. And so Apple has this functionality on all Macs that lets you they can push out rules that will pull malware off of everybody's Macs. It's really, actually really, really good that they can do that. And so just working with Apple is a huge, they're like a freaking opaque, you send emails and you hope you get a response.
I can imagine.
And so that happened. They I think published in TechCrunch that they had done that to clean up the vulnerability, because Zoom couldn't fix the vulnerability because they would have to have applied an update. But if you uninstalled Zoom, there was no update mechanism to get rid of that server. So it was like a forever day vulnerability unless Apple stepped in. So Apple stepped in and cleaned that up. And then someone pointed out, hey, Zoom white labels its software as RingCentral, Zahumu, BizConf. Like Zoom also resells, and so that same functionality wasn't just in Zoom, but it was in a bunch of other products that were all white labeling Zoom. And so I had to go find all those. I was talking to somebody at Hacker News, and Karin Lyons, who's a friend of mine, who then, well, I'll get to that. So yeah, so like we ended up coming up with like, here's all the other cases that's vulnerable. Reached out to Apple. I think they got that cleaned up too. So they ended up removing all the white labels of this as well. Eric Wan reached out to me, and we ended up chatting in a private call. He offered me a job, which I didn't end up taking. He asked me what I wanted. I said, I don't know. Give me a minute. So I went and talked to a contract negotiator. And he's like, what do you want to ask this guy? And I was like, I don't know. He's like, well, what do you got? And I'm like, well, I got college loans. He's like, I should pay off your college loans. So I'm like, okay, great. So I came back to Eric. I'm like, hey, I've got $65,000 in college loans. You want to, like, I'm only here because of my education. And he's like, I'll see what I can do. And he came back with $10,000. So I got $10,000 out of Zoom for that. He also offered me a job. And I said, I don't want it. But Karin Lyons, who I met during the Zoom incident, freaking brilliant software engineer, a brilliant security engineer, like consumes RFCs for lunch. I met him during this whole thing, and I said, you should hire him. And he became the new head of application security at Zoom, and has now. So he's been working for Zoom for a long time. And so brilliant. Like so like that. The whole thing finally, but yeah, it got way bigger than I expected. I expected angry sysadmins, and instead I ended up with international news coverage, Wired, TechCrunch, BBC, NPR, all over the world. You Google me and you still see those vulnerabilities, my name, and you Google News search me, and you'll still see the articles about this. And I was like, okay, well, so that put me on the map in a surprisingly wild way.
And to be fair, there were probably quite a few angry sysadmins as well.
Yes, of course, but I didn't expect it to be that big. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I remember it was a crazy story at the time.
Yeah.
So
unicorn of a vulnerability. It's also it's a simple it wasn't leaked hacking. It was cross-site request forgery in a local server. Right. I was attacking from a browser, just cross origin to a localhost server. So this has opened up my interest into hacking localhost servers running on people's machines and maliciously attacking them from the browser, right? That chain of attacking Zoom is the same mechanism. And so I've always had this curious, how does the browser interplay with a local machine, and what ways can you abuse that functionality has been sort of an area of interest of mine.
Nice. Yeah. We'll get to some of your research in a second, but I did have a follow-up question, which is, so I know that now on Mac especially, you can apps can actually register a custom URL scheme.
Yeah, so it's a URI handler or something like that.
Yeah, like a URI handler. What was that? Was that present before your research, or was you don't know? Okay.
I have no idea.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that functionality, I know it works on Windows that way. Somebody else found that, so the vulnerability didn't work on Windows, except for if you check the box that says always allow the page to open domain, URLs like this. And then the same vulnerability worked on Windows by default, which was but Windows at the time was not using local server solution, it was using the URI handler. Because the thing, and so you threw it in an iframe, it pops the URI, and then there's no dialog box. That dialog box that says, do you actually want to join this call with your camera on, didn't exist. And so the fix was, a week later, Zoom shipped a version of Zoom with, hey, yes, do you want to actually join this call? I also could DDoS your machine by just constantly trying to join you to calls, by just set up the browser to just slam that server endpoint, and it would just constantly grab your focus. And you'd have to I don't even remember how you killed that, but yeah, it was it was a great little I can lock up your computer just by getting you to constantly focus on Zoom.
Well, yeah, you could also, because it's loading an image, basically, you could just have JavaScript running in the browser page.
Correct.
That loads the image with just a different like a dummy parameter that changes its value, which will miss the cache, which will just cause it to load.
I mean, you're always using cache miss. So the payload, the original vulnerability that I had, you had to use cache missing. So you had to throw a little like random generated element into the request header to constantly make a cache miss, because otherwise the browser would cache hit, and you didn't want that. So yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, but yeah, it's incredibly easy to automate with JavaScript. So hilarious.
Yes.
Oh man, yeah. So.
Well, I wasn't an angry sysadmin at the time when I was a pen tester. We were just out cheering you on, I think, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like Zoom either, really, to be honest. I'll say that publicly.
I think somebody also found that you could. I don't remember this. It's like a really old tweet. I think I saw I was reading through like all the tweet response. Somebody may have been able to trigger it via sending you an email to Apple Messages or Apple Mail. When you could get the mail client to load the image locally, but that local image request was causing a local request to a localhost server inside the email client, and suddenly you were then launching the Zoom client open just by opening an email.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I just remember reading the Medium article and being like, "This is insane! No, this can't work."
Yeah, I was also very sassy in that article. I threw a lot of memes in there too. I
remember those too.
Yeah.
Oh,
someone took that whole story and has taken it, and so Saros, who was an intern, or no, he was a professor at Stanford, did a lecture on my vulnerability. Feros is now the CEO of Socket, but he did a lecture on my vulnerability at Stanford, I think. And one of his students actually took the vulnerability and retold the whole story, created an animated video on YouTube. And there's a llama video. There's a video with an animated talking llama retelling the story of this Zoom incident. And so whenever anybody wants to hear this whole story, I'm just like, go watch the llama animated video version of this story, which is wild that I have done something on the internet that warrants someone to have sat down and animated it with llamas. I feel like I've won the internet with just that story right there, right?
Yeah, you win for that.
Oh.
That's what we need to do. That needs to be every kid's dream when they're getting into cybersecurity, right?
Yeah. Do something worthy of being animated with llamas. Yeah, of course.
So it's oddly specific, but if you can get to that goal, kids.
Yeah, I know.
One day. I also love how many people we've had on this podcast who they start going down one thing and it becomes a specialization for them, local host stuff. We're talking to some people the other week who just specialize in kiosks and things like that, and I love that things you get to a certain point and you end up triggering some kind of interest triggers you, like a vulnerability you've discovered or an area of research, and you're just like, do you know what, this is going to be my thing now. So yeah,
you end up with a depth of knowledge, right? You end up being like, huh, I have a depth of knowledge in this thing. There's probably more juicy, there's clearly more here probably. I keep finding vulnerabilities in this space. One case, I have a CVE in a JetBrains plugin where they had a plugin that was interacting with TeamCity, and they had TeamCity, which is basically JetBrains' equivalent of Jenkins. Right. So tester environment. And so they weren't properly sanitizing the creation of the domain that the outgoing HTTP request was going to go to the TeamCity server. Right. And when you set up this plugin on your local machine, you set in, here's the server that I'm talking to, and here's the credentials for the TeamCity instance that I want to interact with. And I could send that server that was running locally on your machine from the browser a request that would be prepended to that domain in a way that I could reroute the request to my domain, and that would get sent with credentials. And so then I was able to exfil your TeamCity instance's credentials to my server, and then I could go on and compromise your TeamCity instance, which is code execution, right? Because TeamCity is a code execution engine by default. And so that, I didn't actually publish the write-up. I wrote some of the write-up on Medium and then dropped it. JetBrains actually pulled down all previous versions of that vulnerable plugin from their plugin store and said, you got to use the latest version. So like basically no one was going to be able to use the older version because there was like that vulnerability was so bad. They're like, we're going to unpublish previous versions of that plugin so that you must be using, don't get owned by this basically.
Oh, TeamCity.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
There's been quite a few TeamCity things recent years. Like vulnerabilities. There's been a few, but quite high profile ones a couple of years or so ago. Sure there was. It's a bit of a mess over there, isn't it? But
well, they were the ones. I mean, it wasn't. I don't blame JetBrains at all, but like that was impact. There was a TeamCity instance that was being used to build the SolarWinds binary that got compromised. There ended up being a New York Times article about that. That I think it was the Times about that. They're like, Russian-based company was. I'm like, no, it's not a Russian-based. They like I ended up reaching out to the reporter about that and being like, hey, no, they're Czech Republic-based. Also, it's not their fault. And like we ended up like having a conversation, and she changed the headline of the article because of that. It was some bad press for JetBrains that got hopefully fixed a bit. So, yeah. So yes, I've been.
2023 was the bug I'm thinking of. Jesus, I thought it was a lot more recent than that. Time flies.
There was an XSS that I got two people I collided with somebody else on a vulnerability. It was a cross-site scripting vulnerability that was actually detected by I was working for Gradle at the time, and it was detected by Detectify. And cross-site scripting in TeamCity is also remote code execution, because if you can get XSS on TeamCity, you can then set up jobs and then you can code execution on the machine. So like it's a TeamCity like as an attack target, JetBrains, TeamCity, and like Jenkins. It's a really juicy target because you get server infrastructure code execution if you can, pop that stuff.
Yeah. Horrible stuff. But hey, TeamCity. I had good fun with that.
Yeah.
Good fun. For example, it's the exact same reasons. And I like the fact that they removed all other versions of the plugin as well, because when those 2023 wave of TeamCity vulnerabilities popped up for specific versions, I was like, do you know what? This would be really good for like my team of pen testers to learn from. We'll do a lab on it and they can all just fuck around in a lab and stuff like that. And it's like, I'll just go and grab the old version. I just had all the old versions of all the vulnerable versions still up on their website. So didn't even pull those. So you could just still download them, which is great. Yeah. That's good to see they didn't do that with a plugin at least.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've spoken to people in the security team at JetBrains, and they're like, yeah, we can't, like, that we don't want to disclose too many details about the vulnerabilities in our TeamCity instances. I'm like, why are you guys not going full disclosure on this stuff? Like, you guys are like limited access of data. Like, I'm the one that's the researcher publishing full details about the vulnerabilities. And they're like, yeah, we have a lot of customers that just want to update their TeamCity instance. And I'm like,
yeah,
I'm face palming. I'm like, come on now. Like, I'm giving, like, I've got like RC exploits. Like, that's not good. Don't, make sure you're updating your critical infrastructure like TeamCity and Jenkins. Like, That's
exactly how I came across this. It was doing incident response for a couple of clients, and two of them just had these ancient TeamCity versions just installed, and they just refused to update them. One of them because no one apparently owned the infrastructure, so people were using it, but no, there was no owner actually assigned to maintenance of the infrastructure, which is incredible. I can't remember what happened to the other one, but yeah, it was two at the same time, just why I remember it so sort of vividly. But fun times for that. You can tell this is really old because I just found it on GitHub whilst we were talking. I wrote an old script to rehash some of the vulnerabilities because I didn't like the way like the original POC was. But you can tell it's a really old one because I've added a reference in a README to Fortinet, which is a very un-Andy thing to do. Like you would,
yeah.
Wouldn't be caught dead doing that these days, but it's still. I might remove it now, but yeah, it's still there.
You hate Fortinet, Swift.
I do. Yeah. I do. I have an ongoing battle with them in my head. Anyway, I have no idea who I am, but I have a battle with my head, and that's what matters.
my ongoing battle is against this vulnerability. So it's fundamentally the issue that I have is. So I was talking to you about this Tib3rius before we were chatting. It's like, how is it that we have browsers that are able to talk to localhost servers on our machines without getting prompted? Mm-hmm. And so finally, in the last year, Chrome rolled out. They actually broke a bunch of exploit chains. So I was building on this. I was curious about MCP servers. Feroz, my boss at Socket, when I was there as a contractor. We were thinking about building out a security research team and ultimately decided not to. He was like, hey, like, I bet you there's some vulnerabilities in this AI stuff. Let's go like poke around. So I ended up like digging into the MCP server stuff and being like, hey, there is like all of the all the MCP SDKs are all vulnerable to DNS rebinding by default, which allows when you're running an MCP server on your local machine in HTTP mode, not standard IO, the browser to talk to that localhost MCP server and interact with it by using DNS rebinding. And it took there was actually some other people that found this vulnerability, but like they were kind of doing the high level, like you can find this in all the like the end MCP servers because they were not compliant with the specification. And what I ended up kind of realizing was, okay, what's the root cause of this vulnerability? The root cause is that all the SDKs, Rust, Go, TypeScript, Python, are all not properly guarding against this. They offer the functionality to guard against it, but they weren't enabling it by default. And there's like this line in the MCP spec in the docs that says, hey, if you're running this MCP server locally, turn this flag on to go protect yourself. No one does that because everybody's like, hey, it works. And like, why would I turn on something that might break something? Like it just works. And so I have CVEs in almost every single SDK of the MCP specification and a $1,500 bounty from Anthropic for finding that, all of their SDKs were all out of spec compliant. The spec says guard against this attack chain, which is DNS rebinding against the browser, And so in order to sort of demonstrate this vulnerability, NCC Group built this tool called Singularity, which is the DNS rebinding tool / framework. And if anybody here have you guys played with MCP Inspector?
No.
So MCP Inspector is a debugging tool for debugging and testing MCP servers, because MCP servers don't use standard REST. They use streaming HTTP and they use JSON RPC as the communication channel. So your your Postman or your Burp Suite's not going to necessarily know how to interact with these things appropriately. You've got to use a different communication channel. And so in order to truly demonstrate this vulnerability, I built with a bunch of Claude prompts or cursor prompts, a module on top of NCC Group Singularity, which is a DNS rebinding framework that attacks the browser and then leverages the browser to, it creates a communication channel similar to MCP Inspector, which is a debugging tool, but then routes the communication over the rebound DNS connection inside the browser. So what you do is you rebind the MCP, or what NCP Group Singularity does is it does a DNS rebinding attack against an iframe, and then that's like a sub element of the HTML. And so you're routing all the communication as window events into that iframe. And then the iframe is then sending the requests to the server and giving you the responses back. So it's bidirectional communication back to the hosting page. And that hosting page can then also talk back to the malicious server. So you could theoretically create an attack chain where you can get somebody hooked on their local machine, connect to their locally running MCP server, and then make any tool call as if you're the agent, the LLM agent on your machine, but I'm just actually maliciously talking to your thing. And so one of the big cases of this is Google's Toolbox. They have a Toolbox MCP server, which is an MCP server for interacting with databases. And so you can hook up this MCP server to be able to make database SQL calls, also can make HTTP requests. You do configure it. It does use, theoretically, I haven't validated, but the idea is that it can use prepared statements. And so you're not making just raw SQL calls, I don't think, in most cases. But it does, if you have any exposed queries, you can, as an attacker, make any of those requests. And Google, I gave it to them. I told them about that. I gave them 90 days to fix it. They didn't fix it. They gave me a $200 bounty for it. Their fix was to make another, you've got to opt in flag. And so I went, in the last 2 weeks, I went full disclosure on them, being like, hey, I can exploit this. Here's the full attack chain. Here's the video POC. And also this should get a CV number assigned to it, which I did reach out to Volncheck. Volncheck was like, yeah, we're not going to help you with a CVE with this. We're just going to require the appeals process, and we don't have the time to allocate to this, which is, fine. I need to go through MITRE probably to appeal this, because Google's not going to sign because they don't think the severity is high enough. Yeah. It's one of those okay, just you put, Sisyphus pushing a rock uphill. All right, fine. Yes, so yes, pushing more rocks uphill. Great, okay.
So what is Google's fix?
They added their explanation of why they didn't fix it is because it requires, fixing the DNS rebinding across the board requires that you validate the origin header on the HTTP request to basically say, so the HTTP request that comes from the browser, the origin header is not going to be what you expect. So if you have legitimate requests, Well, yeah. There is no legitimate like connection request to an MCP server from the browser, really, truly, right? Because like it's not
Right.
talking HTTP. But regardless,
Yeah.
in order to guard against it appropriately, if a browser is the thing that's trying to make this connection, it's going to have an origin header, and that origin header should be not myattackerdomain.com. It should be localhost or 127.0.0.1 if you're talking to it from the browser, right? Which you normally should not be talking to it from the browser. Yeah, so you want to check that header and then reject requests that are coming from an origin that don't make sense, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so across the board, all of these servers were not doing that, and they needed to be doing that. There's like a set of like people put like 127.0.1, 0. That's fine. But if you had like if the origin is myattackerdomain.com, I can DNS rebind. So DNS rebinding at a high level is I have a domain that I set up. I run my own DNS infrastructure, right? And because my DNS result, so I own lighthouse-sec.xyz as a domain. I can set up my own custom DNS server for all subdomains of that domain. So I set up an NX record or an NS record in my DNS, and I say any requests for DNS records for this subdomains of this high level domain, use my DNS server. Right. And so that means that I can set up a malicious DNS server that is set up to intentionally respond with two separate responses. So the first response would be some public IP address, which will then load the HTML into your browser. And then you cause a cache miss inside the browser that forces a DNS request or you like flood the DNS cache inside the browser, which then forces a cache miss on the second lookup for that same domain. And that takes like 30 to 45 seconds. And then the browser will then make another DNS lookup for that same domain. And the response from that server will be, hey, I'm 127.0.0.1, or I'm 0.0.0.0, which is, all zeros. And you're not supposed to route to 0.0.0.0, but it does, and it routes to localhost. And then suddenly you're making requests to the localhost server. And so the JavaScript is talking cross-origin. This bypasses cross-origin resource sharing protections because you're actually not talking cross-origin. You're talking to the same origin, but the origin's IP address has just changed.
Right. Yeah.
And so you can attack an internal network this way. So I could rebind it to like 192.168.1.1. And if your router's not protected against this appropriately, I can, attack your router. Like there's all these different sort of attack methods you can use now based upon that. And so finally, Chrome rolled out a fix that's called LNA, local network access, in the last 2 months, which puts a prompt pop-up that says, hey, this website's trying to talk to your local network. Do you want to allow it? But it doesn't work with WebSockets, as demonstrated by
I knew there was going to be a but somewhere.
Yeah. It doesn't work against WebSockets, and that's how somebody just hacked OpenClaw. So there was an OpenClaw vulnerability because LNA works, but it doesn't protect against WebSockets, and if you were running OpenClaw on your local machine, you could attack OpenClaw via WebSockets in the browser.
Okay.
Oh boy.
And so Firefox and Safari both don't guard against this. Brave has guarded against this since 2023 or something like that. So they've been maybe 2022. So Brave has guarded all the Chrome-based browsers. So Edge, Chrome, they're all guarded against this. The reason that Chrome, I think, actually finally fixed it was because several months ago, back in the middle of last year, Facebook was caught using a locally hosted running web server inside of Android to de-anonymize users. So when you were running the Facebook or Meta app on Android, they were spinning up a localhost server, and the Facebook tracking pixel was making a localhost request to that server in your phone to de-anonymize you. And some researchers found this by looking through Internet Archive like HEIC files and found that this traffic was happening, and were able to reconstitute what was actually happening and the Yandex was also doing this. And so I think that those sort of bad actor behaviors were finally the catalyst for the browsers to be like, hey, we should really not allow local host requests to happen without the user being prompted.
Everything needs a catalyst again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Everything needs a catalyst.
It wasn't eBay scanning our machines. It wasn't I have a slew. So I have a GitHub issue that I have captured all of the cases that I could find of where the browser was a fundamental part of the exploit chain in terms of attacking a localhost server. So part of my talk that I gave, I wrote like, my vulnerability in Zoom used the same exploit chain. There have been like Trend Micro had a password manager that was vulnerable to this that Tavis Ormandy found an RCE vulnerability in. JetBrains had a previous vulnerability in the same chain where someone could force you to this is before JetBrains' IDEs said, hey, do you trust this project? You could, if JetBrains was running on your machine, there was a local server, you could get a person to open a JetBrains project in your IDE by getting it to be loaded from an SMB drive. So using that local server, you could tell it, hey, load this JetBrains project from this SMB drive over here. And then when it pulled that project from the SMB drive, JetBrains would automatically run the pre-install scripts. They were set up in the project XML config file. And so you had code execution on the developer machine. ASUS has some driver hub that had a remote code execution vulnerability in it that was the same thing. There's just been a slew of all of these apps that people have developed. I have in my slide deck, so the JetBrains IDE, you could attack browsers with this, you could attack, in 2006, you could attack routers with this by, one-line config, reconfigure DNS. Trend Micro, Zoom, Dell support agent, Bill Demke, I'm saying his name wrong, I'm sorry, Bill, had a remote code execution vulnerability. eBay had the port scanning stuff. ASUS had a driver hub exploit. Anthropic's MCP inspector had an RCE vulnerability in it using the same thing. So this is a long history of this same exploit chain being leveraged as a valid exploit chain to attack localhost servers. And so finally browsers are doing something about it, but only Chrome has gotten around to actually fixing it. They did roll this out in 2022 with this thing called private network access, but they rolled it back because it broke a bunch of shit. So I'm hoping that LNA, local network access, actually sticks because it'll actually, it adds an extra step of you actually have to yes, I do want this exploit to work. Yeah.
I mean, I remember back in, I forget how long ago, but there was, I think it was the WebRTC API in JavaScript allowed JavaScript to kind of access local networks. It was you could create a not a port scan. You could create a sort of a host finder script that ran in your browser and just would report back, I found all these active IP addresses in your local network.
Gareth Hayes wrote that at Portswigger. That doesn't work anymore. That POC doesn't work anymore, but Gareth Hayes has a POC that he wrote up on. I'd be curious to pull the HTML for that POC that he wrote, throw it at Claude and say, hey, go fix any errors that you think and see if I can get it to work again.
Do it.
Yeah. I mean, it all goes back to, browsers I really weren't supposed to get this complicated.
There are operating systems, right? Operating systems that, but they have sandboxes. But the problem is that there's a fundamental sandbox that's the code execution, but we're kind of not thinking about the networking layer. The other thing that we've seen too is there are cases where you run Chrome headless browsers, and Chrome headless browsers inside of corporate networks can be used for server-side request forgery to pull the AWS ADA AM endpoint data in. And, if you're using a Chrome browser to generate PDFs, because, let's use an entire operating system to generate PDFs from HTML. That's exactly the solution we needed. You can pull metadata that you wouldn't expect, and you can control the headers, right? So you can also set the, yes, I am, actually, this is an okay request bit, because you have full control over the headers. And now you're pulling, imagine you guys, the pen testers, have found that and used that attack vector.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. PDF generation is such a fun thing to exploit. Just not even if you can get metadata from AWS, obviously that's funny, but even just crawling around the back end of a website and trying to find other ports that are open and accidentally stumbling upon a back end web app that wasn't supposed to be reachable. Yeah. It's whoops. Here's the admin interface.
Yep.
So yeah, it's good.
I'm laughing because there's a test going at the moment. I can't say who for. is heavily involved with PDFs, and there's a lot to do with LLMs and MCPs in the background as well. It's just, it's all sort of tying together a bit too.
No, I know, and there was that DEF CON talk about hacking Uber with a PDF generator, right? And they, you know, and then I was like, I reached out, I during that talk, at the end of the talk, you know, it's like a huge freaking audience at DEF CON. I raised my hand, I'm like, hey, you know, did you guys get a CVE in the product that, like, you know, that was used to generate those PDFs? And they're like, yeah, so the maintainers of the project said that it's not vulnerable because that's an implementation detail. Like, we don't need to be guarding against SRF. That's the, like, you know, you shouldn't be feeding it like untrusted HTML into our thing. Like, that's on you. And I'm like, big facepalm, like, you need to be putting, you know, security needs to happen in layers, right? Like, you, and so there's cases like that where I'm like, this really needs a CVE number, even though the CVE number is, this is not fixed. Like, this is a known vulnerability. We've discussed it. It's in a conference talk over here. And, like, you're not going to know that you're vulnerable because of the reason, but, like, that's vulnerable. Be careful.
That's what what CVE is for, really, at the end of the day, is awareness and cataloging.
Yeah. People only think about it as like, hey, like, this is the version that's vulnerable, go fix it. Like, go update to this new version that's fixed. Sometimes the case is, no, you can't. Like, there is no fix. You just got to go reconfigure the server to fix this. You got to reconfigure your use case. And that's not a dependency update. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Still needs CVE.
I think so.
Yeah, I like that.
I've argued that's an argument that you can have with MITRE, though, sometimes. Like, MITRE is not always thrilled with that.
With that approach.
Yeah. I mean, might have their own problems right now anyway. With ridiculous amounts of CVEs that they have to put out and a reduced budget and everything. So honestly, we MITRE is the problem, I think, at the moment.
They're the bottleneck.
Yeah, it's just going to get worse with LLMs finding stuff. Yeah.
Oh, it is already worse. I mean, maintainers are already, like, you see on LinkedIn. I'm in the Open Source Security Foundation Vulnerability Disclosure Working Group, and, like, you know, you hang out in calls, and, like, people are getting, like, just inundated with slop reports. I mean, you're seeing it. I mean, you know, you get some of it in, like, bug bounty triagers are also getting inundated with slop reports too. You know, I was talking to a friend of mine in the industry for bug bounty, and he's like, "You made a poke thing with stick, get money out of machine." And that stick has gotten way shorter. And so, of course, more people are poking it with that stick. Or the sticks are easier to, like, you know, sure, you're not getting as much money, but, like, it looks like, oh, maybe that stick is easier to actually use now. I could probably make it work. And, like, it's, you know, the sticks look convincing, even though they're hallucinated by LLMs.
Hallucinated sticks.
Yeah, hallucinated sticks.
That's what we're not.
Yeah.
That's got to be a good outtake from the video, I reckon. We'll just start with that. Hallucinated sticks.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? It's true. I do feel sorry for maintainers. Having a hard time with it at the moment. Yeah.
They should write good code to begin with, Swift.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. You be mean to them. Yeah. It's a serious point, man. Sometimes I don't know which side of it I fall into. Like, there's too much slop being sent to them, but there's also, like, a high volume of stuff being found where we would have never found stuff before. So it's a kind of it's a fucking chicken and egg thing, isn't it? Like, they're never going to be able to keep up with the volume of submissions now. So what do you do?
It's crazy right now.
I mean, clearly we just need more automation.
Yeah. Just LLMs talking to LLMs at both ends.
Yeah.
I see nothing that can go wrong with that situation.
No. Singularity when? Sorry, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, sorry, we're not calling it singularity. We're calling it AGI now. Is that that's what it is, right?
That is the lingo.
Yeah.
Singularity rebranded.
Yeah.
Because it was too aggressive. That.
You know,
Scared too many people, so yeah, we'll give it a fluffy name. It's all right.
Yeah.
That'll do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that core takeaway that's just kind of like, you know, old vulnerabilities can do new tricks, right? Like, you know, a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, a lot of the research that I do is not necessarily novel or new. The reason I call myself a vulnerability janitor is because I mean, a lot of the times I'm cleaning up vulnerabilities that have been left around by other maintainers or other researchers. Like one of the things that I have found, if you want to go get some CVEs that are valid, go look at old DEF CON talks or Black Hat talks, and then go track down the original go track down the original source code that the vulnerabilities existed in. I've thought about doing, getting senior project for my old alma mater WPI, getting some students together and being like, let's go look through some old DEF CON talks, let's go look through some old Black Hat talks, and go find vulnerabilities that never got CVs assigned, and actually the vulnerability never got fixed.
I reckon there's a fair few out there.
Right? I think that there's a lot of cases where it's we've done the research, somebody's published it, somebody's talked about it, and it's public, but no one did the final step of hey, let's actually get the maintainer to resolve this. I've had to do this sometimes. There was a very old vulnerability in a YAML parsing library called SnakeYAML. And it was a remote code execution vulnerability in deserialization of YAML, SnakeYAML files. You could create gadget chains. And the maintainer had the staunch stance that you shouldn't be parsing untrusted YAML files with this library. And if you are parsing untrusted YAML files, you got to reconfigure it with this other way. And I'm you got to make it so that the default is secure. The people are getting shot in the foot with the insecure default. We got to fix this. And he was staunchly no, I'm there's this feature called tags in YAML. And he's we've got it. I'm and I was 162 comments. I wrote a blog post about this, 162 comments in this argument back and forth. People are being mean to this poor maintainer too. And I'm okay, this is stupid. I've tried the verbal argument thing long enough. Let's get on a call. So I ended up on a call with this guy. I was in Punta Cana on vacation. And I ended up on a call with this maintainer being hey, can we fix this, going back and forth for an hour? And we're going nowhere. And I don't know what the hell I said, but finally I'm can we just do this? And he's oh yeah, that? Oh yeah, we could do that. And that prompted SnakeYAML 2.0, which is now fixed, which is it's now secure by default. There's no longer remote code execution vulnerability in SnakeYAML by default, because I had to get on a phone call with the maintainer and convince this guy that it was bad enough that it needed to get fit. And it's stuff like that it takes so much time to do that extra work, but it protects the whole industry. I've had people come up to me at I was at PAX East, which is a video game convention, and I had someone come up to me and say, thank you for doing that. I'm I don't even know this guy, and he's coming out of the freaking blue and coming up to me and saying, thank you for that thing that you did in Swiss SnakeYAML to make that go away. And I'm oh, that's a wild. And so it's but companies were moving so fast, and SAST tool vendors are trying to get SAST it's more advantageous for a SAST tool vendor to go add another alert than it is for them to go fix the underlying problem in the library, because they can sell a SAST alert. They can't sell a fix in the underlying library.
Yes.
So the incentives are all screwy in terms of how we actually make, the financial incentives are all screwy in terms of actually fixing this stuff properly.
Doesn't make commercial sense.
Yeah.
What a world we live in.
Hey.
Do you ever end up a little bit more depressed after these chats when we started at the state of the world?
I mean, I've been enough down a nihilist. Why do you think I'm wearing a pirate outfit? Right?
I was hoping we could go the whole show without mentioning the pirate outfit.
Why? Right? At a certain point, you end up down the nihilist well. Sorry. So people on the audio, I walk around my day to day. If you ever just want to meet me, I'm the guy in a pirate outfit or some outlandish hat at a security conference. Come say hi to me. Why do I walk around day to day wearing a pirate hat? Right? And the question is some people walk. I'm why are you doing that? And I'm I've been down the nihilistic well of it's all pointless, to the point where it's actually we create meaning, and then you kind of just lean it. I've leaned into absurdism, right? The whole thing is freaking absurd. We create our own meaning in life. At a certain point, we get to choose what matters. I pick fights in the CVE world. Why do I pick fights in the CVE world? Because I choose that matters. Right? I could walk away from the CV and be it really doesn't matter. I don't need to pick this fight. But you know what? I choose that it matters, and I'm going to pick this fight to make sure that we can make the world a little bit better.
Oh, I feel like I'm at therapy, but thank
love
you.
it.
I really, really like
love
that. I'm going to get that put on a t-shirt. I choose what matters. Might even say it to my manager
nice.
tomorrow. No, I choose what matters. Not what you think. No, I'm not doing this shit today. No.
I know.
choose what
Yeah,
matters.
well, your manager does he's choosing what matters. His manager choosing what matters. Some point, somebody's got free will somewhere. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's all delusional. I don't know.
I have it now. I have the free will. Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan.
You're welcome.
You've unleashed
Yes. So, Jonathan, if people want more therapy, where can our listeners find and follow you online?
You can see me rant on LinkedIn about the CV program and vulnerabilities in general, trying to make the world a little bit better place, engaging in a little bit of rage just to like make the world a better place on LinkedIn primarily these days, because X is kind of a disaster. I do cross post on a couple other places, but LinkedIn is where I primarily post these days. You can follow me on GitHub if you want to. I have people who are like, oh yeah, like, I saw you have a new job, and I'm like, they're like, where did you see that? And like, oh, you put it on on your GitHub. I'm like, oh, darn, dang. I hadn't posted on LinkedIn yet, but I posted it on my GitHub. And I will check X occasionally. You can also email me, jonathan.leitschuh@gmail.com. Good luck spelling my last name. You can find it. Google me, you'll find my last name. Yeah.
It'll also be in the description of this podcast and the name of this podcast.
Yes.
And yeah, we'll put links to your socials in the description as well.
Assuming Tib3rius puts the right name in the description as well.
I will.
Yes, yeah. I'm not. Yes, I'm Jonathan. Yes, yeah.
Joseph.
I don't know how that happened. Anyway.
Right. Yes, you've been trying to win this for about 10 minutes now. So.
Ironically enough, that is the name of my ex-fiance's new fiance.
Joe's.
Okay, well, that wasn't the reason.
No, but somehow that happened.
Oh boy.
Yep.
Well, on that bombshell,
Thank
you for listening. I've been Tib3rius. He's been Andy Swift.
Yeah.
We've been joined by Jonathan Leitschuh, and this has been Across the Podcast. You can find all of our social media links in the episode description or on acrossthepodcast.net. And we will see you next time.
Cheers.
Bye.